In today's episode of Gaffer and Gear, I'm finally having a look at the Aputure MC-Pro 8 kit. Now these lights have a full colour gamut light engine boasting a CCT range from 2000 Kelvin all the way up to 10,000 Kelvin, tracking to the Planckian curve. They have the advanced colour modes like XY and an advanced HSI mode that enable you to dial in any colour that you wish. Now my favourite thing about these, Lumen Radio CRMX control. Hi everyone, and again thank you for watching Gaffer and Gear. Today I'm finally reviewing the Aputure MC-Pros. Alright, so I'm just going to start off with why this episode is so late. Aputure sent me a massive shipment with everything they wanted me to review for the year. So it had in it this case here of the finished MC-Pro kit. It had the Infini bars, it had their tubes, and still to be reviewed, it had the Amaran 300C and 150Cs, which I've still yet to do the review on. So a lot of product came in the one gigantic shipment, but unfortunately there was a paperwork error and it got seized by customs. So it was seized for nearly 4 months. So that it took a long time for us for me to finally get my hands on this the release product here. To do a review on it. Now, in terms of other things leading up to the delay, prior to me having this kit here, I had this kit. And this is the beta version, so the first sort of proof of concept version that they had. So I'm a very lucky boy, I get to keep both kits, so 16 MCs in total, and I love them. They're great lights. But what caused the delay here is this kit, the difference between this kit and this kit isn't just the accessories, there's also some differences in the lights. So I had spent about 6 to 9 months getting really familiar with the beta version of the lights, and the release version of the lights was slightly different. So when I initially went to shoot the review, I was showing stuff that didn't work because it worked on the beta versions, but it wasn't in the finished product. And I also found a very big surprise with the finished product, which no one's mentioned yet, which is a big plus and why I think gaffers will be interested in buying these. All right, so what's the advantage that this has over other pocket lights that might be of interest to gaffers and might persuade you to buy maybe an 8 kit of these instead of buying 2, 3 or 4 of them? Well, you can use this as a CRMX receiver. All you need is the optional DMX adapter cable. Okay, the light on this side is receiving its CRMX commands via a dedicated CRMX receiver, and the light on this side is receiving its commands via the MC-Pro. Okay, let's have a look at the response times. Now your dedicated CRMX receivers do have indicators on the side here to let you know if they're turned on, if they're receiving a signal, and what your signal strength is. So you don't have those indicators on your MC-Pro. But here's what I've been doing as a workaround, because I have been using these as CRMX receivers when I run out of these. All right, so what I do is all of the MC-Pros that I'm using as a CRMX receiver, I have them all set to the same DMX start address. And if we want to check if we're getting a CRMX signal to this, all I do is send a light command through to it. So I'll just yell out to my best boy, okay, the MC is going to turn on bright red. All right, if it does, he's receiving CRMX. If it doesn't, well, then he's not receiving it. Now the whole kit sells for about $1,900 US. That's about 2,400 to 2,500 Australian dollars. All right, so the lights come in the case. Now it's a sturdy enough case and all that, but the case is also your charging station. Now, unlike the original MCs, these charge via 4 pins here. So these charge really, really fast. So from completely flat to fully charged, you're looking at about 90 minutes. Now, you can charge them off AC, or you can use a D-tap adapter cable and charge them off an external battery. Now, I do this a lot. So what I've found is very rarely am I actually using the MC-Pros to the point where they're flat. I'm never really running them at 100%. They're running it usually at low levels in the background or something like that. So at the end of the shoot when I'm packing up, we pack up the MCs first, chuck them in their kit, We have them running off, charging off the battery. And by the time I get everything else packed up and I'm ready to put this in the van, usually they're charged, or I've maybe got one or two that are at about 90 or 95%. Then the next time I need them, I pull them out of the van, put them back on the battery, and those ones that are a little bit flat get that additional top up while I'm getting everything else ready. So very seldom, because I can run this off batteries and as a charger, very seldom do I need to take this out of the van, bring it into the workshop here and charge it because of this battery scenario. So that really has been a savior. Now the thing I found here is once I take the power cable out of this compartment, the battery can sit in there. So that stops you from closing the case while you're charging as well, because you shouldn't have the case closed whilst you are charging. Now, in terms of other cables, you also get two USB-C cables because you've got two USB ports here as well. So you can charge the 8 MC Pros in here, plus charge anything else that uses USB at the same time. Now, also included in this 8 kit is 8 of the lights. So these are very straightforward to use. In terms of the user interface, you've got a small color screen up the top here. Now, on the main page of the menu are your operating modes. You've got CCT, an advanced HSI mode, RGB, a Roscoe and Lee gels library. On the next page down, you've got source matching, XY, and special effects. Now, in terms of selecting your menu, you've got a menu button here, so it's pretty straightforward. You press that a number of times, it'll go through different menu levels. The menu button is also your back button. You've got your scroller up here to make your adjustments, and you can press the button there to toggle between your options or to set your options. So it'll take you literally maybe a minute to 2 minutes to figure out how to drive the menu system, and then you're off and running for the rest of your life with these. It's very, very straightforward. Now, the build quality is sensational, very, very solid. In terms of a negative for me, I've only got the one negative, but I think it might be a big negative for a lot of people. It's only got the one thread point, and that's at the bottom of the light. It doesn't have a thread point on the back or on the sides. Now, when I asked Aputure why they did this, it's to do with the size of the battery that's in there, because they wanted to give maximum runtime capability out of the unit, and unfortunately that led to limitations with where you could put threads for batteries. In terms of a rear mounting option, the back of the light does have built-in magnets. Now, in terms of the LED light engine, it is a spot configuration, not a flood configuration. Now, I've tried to find what the beam angle is online, but I can't find any literature for that. But as you can see, it is quite spotty, which is why these look quite impressive initially on paper. Now, like most spotlights, there is a bit of color fraying towards the edge of the beam. Now, if that color fraying is an issue, well, it comes with 8 flat diffusers. So once you put the diffuser on, that mixes everything together and gives you the one consistent color of light from one edge of the beam to the other. Also in the kit are 8 of these dome diffusers, which give you more of a flood out of the unit. Now, in terms of problems with the dome diffusers, because the light is a spot, given certain circumstances, you can actually see the LEDs in camera if you're going to use these as an effect light in shot. I have had this be a problem on set a few times, and even if I'm using both diffusers together, the flat diffuser and the dome diffuser, this can still be a problem. But yeah, it really comes down to bad luck in terms of where the focus is on the camera and the brightness setting of the light versus the brightness in the room. Now, it wouldn't be an Aputure product if the value ended there. You also get 8 of the honeycombs. Now, because the spot lenses here have a little bit of diffusion over the top, this is one of the few lights that actually works with a honeycomb despite having spot LED lenses. Let's take a look. So that's with the honeycomb on, and that's with the honeycomb off. So we've got plenty of light modifying options in here for a small kit. Now let's have a look at the rest of the stuff, which is for mounting. So you get 4 of these ball mounts. Now these ball kits have at the bottom of them high-powered magnets, which are detachable. And you can also use this as a shoe mount as well as a stand mount. Now it can take both common threads. There's a thread adapter in there, but just one thing to note, when the kit comes back to you, just make sure you've got the adapter in there because it can easily end up on top of a light stand. Now, in terms of other things you get in here, you get 2 of these articulated arms with, I call these nano clamps, and you get 4 spigots. Now the last thing you get in the kit is a whole heap of these pieces of metal, which are designed to work with the magnets, of course. Now on the back side here, you've got a removable protector, and underneath that is some really powerful super glue. So I'm just going to emphasize that again. Really powerful super glue. So if you take that off and decide to stick this to a surface, it ain't coming off. So be very careful where you use these. I would only use these on things that you want to use as part of your kit. Maybe you're going to build up an adapter where you want a piece of wood or something with multiple MCs on it, something like that, because once you've used these, you're not going to get them back. Okay, so let's go through the pros and cons that we haven't gone through yet. Okay, so the big pro for this system is runtime versus the charge time. So we've got 8 lights here. Let's say we're only going to be using 4 for the day, and we want to run 4 continuously. Now, if we run these at full power, they will be flat in 2 hours. Now, if we're charging the other 4 at the same time and they're completely flat, they will be fully charged in 1.5 hours, giving us half an hour leeway. So by the time these ones are flat and need to go back on charge, the original 4 that you put on charge earlier will be ready to take from the kit and put onto set. And this setup here represents for me a combination of all the positives. The DOP wanted coloured accent lights on all of the trees to complement the coloured lighting we were putting in the background. The MC-Pros gave us full colour gamut lighting at our fingertips, CRMX for fast, accurate control, and weather resistance. In terms of other pros for me, the DMX profile options. You've got your basic options, you've got your crossover modes like CCT RGB and CCT HSI, you've even got an XY mode and an ultimate mode. But as some negatives for the DMX, none of these profiles are 16-bit, and if you're looking at doing instant transitions, you can't turn off the smoothing. As a negative, the charging case is not weather resistant. Also as a negative, the diffusers can change the values on your CCTs. Let's take a look at how they affect 3200 Kelvin first. Now I've taken readings here with no diffusion, the flat diffusion, the dome diffuser, and both diffusers used together. Now the maximum difference in the CCT is about 200 Kelvin. The color accuracy does improve ever so slightly when you're using the diffusers, and the white point or delta UV has very minimal shift. This would be unnoticeable without a color spectrometer. Now just a note here, if you're going to use both diffusions and you want to get as close as you can to 3200 Kelvin, I would recommend dialing in 3400 Kelvin. Now it's a different story in daylight. When set to 5600 Kelvin, the maximum difference depending on the diffusers you're using can be as much as 600 Kelvin. There are some noticeable changes in the color accuracy, and the green magenta values do have a bit of shift in them, to almost as much as a 1/8 correction gel. Now if you're using both diffusers and you want to get as close as you can to 5600 Kelvin, I would recommend dialing in 6550. Right, so let's have a quick look at the brightness of the Aputure MC-Pro. Now I've taken these readings at a distance of 1 meter here in the workshop. Now to give you something to compare it to, I've also taken readings with the DMG Dash. Now it's a bit of an unfair comparison for a couple of reasons. Number one, the DMG Dash is double the wattage in terms of its light engine, and the other reason it can be an unfair comparison is the MC-Pro is a spot, whereas the DMG Dash is a flood. So the reason I'm comparing the two of these is the DMG Dash is regarded by a lot of gaffers as the gold standard in pocket lights. A lot of gaffers own this, so if I'm going to compare this, I should compare it to something that they know. So anyway, here are the results. So let's first off take a look with no diffusers attached. And no real surprise, in the center of the beam, the MC-Pro is brighter than the DMG Dash. There's no real surprise there because the DMG Dash is a floodlight and the MC-Pro is a spotlight. All right, so let's have a look at the next set of results now. So the next set of results are with the flat diffusers on. Now this really surprised me. Okay, let's take a look. So with the flat diffusers on, the DMG Dash and the MC-Pro come in at almost identical brightness levels. So that really did surprise me there. All right, so now for the next thing we'll look at is with the dome dishes attached. And with the dome dishes attached, no surprise, the DMG Dash comes in at almost 60% brighter. All right, so before we get into the DMX testing, I just want to give you a quick tip based on having two of these kits. Now, one of the big problems with DMX is setting your DMX address and then having someone using the light accidentally changing the address on you. Okay, so to change your address here, you just literally turn the wheel. Now, here's the problem. So if you're trying to squeeze this into a small space, this literally acts like a wheel on the ground. So I've had people trying to put these on shelves, and it's just rolled along like that and changed the DMX address. I've had people mount them to walls and do the same thing, all right? So this was set to DMX address 1. It is now set to DMX address 133. So quite often I've had people hand them back to me going, Andrew, it's not working, and it is literally 50, 100 DMX addresses off what I set it to. So here's the very, very quick and easy workaround. Once you've set your DMX address, press the red button down, and that'll lock it. Okay, so now this can be rolled around and the DMX address doesn't change on you. Now here's the bonus. At the end of the day, you've turned this off, put it on charge, whatever. Now the next day when you pull it out, chances are if you use CRMX or DMX, you're going to be using that again to run the light. So next time when you turn the light on, it fires up to the DMX address menu because that's what you got it locked on. Chances are you're using DMX again. Chances are you're even using the same profile. All you want to do is change your DMX address. So just press the red button down to unlock, roll in your new DMX address, press the button down again, and you're ready to go. So take it from me, this is best practice. Okay, let's start off the DMX testing. I've got the Aputure MC-Pro running off an 8-bit CCT HSI profile. It is receiving its commands via its internal CRMX receiver, and in this version of the firmware, there is no options to turn the smoothing on and off. Now, to make sure nothing is interfering with the CRMX receiver, I also have the Bluetooth disabled. To give you something to compare it to, I have a DMG Dash, which is also running off an 8-bit CCT HSI profile. It is also receiving its commands via its internal CRMX receiver, and to make sure nothing is interfering with the CRMX receiver, I also have its Bluetooth receiver turned off. Both lights will be receiving their commands at the same time. Let's start off with instant on-off commands. Now let's have a look at some half-second cues. Now let's take a look at some 1-second cues. Now let's take a look at some 2.5-second cues. Now let's take a look at some 5-second cues. Now let's have a look at some CCT changeovers between 5600 Kelvin and 3200 Kelvin, starting with instant changeovers. Now for some half-second cues. Now for some 1-second cues. Now for some 2.5 second changeovers. Now for some 5 second changeovers. Now let's have a look at some changeovers between the CCT and the HSI mode, starting with instant changeovers. Now for some half-second changeovers. Now for some 1 second changeovers. Now for some 2.5 second changeovers. And finally, some 5 second changeovers. And finally, some random manual brightness inputs. Let's start going through some of the data I've collected for these now, starting off with the dimming characteristics. Let's start off by looking at 3200 Kelvin, and these readings were taken with no diffuser. I've taken readings at 100%, 50%, 10% and 5% brightness. As you can see, there is a minimum change in the CCT. The colour accuracy stays unchanged, and any shift in the white point or green magenta value is imperceivable. Now let's have a look at 5600 Kelvin. The CCT remains very consistent, the colour accuracy remains consistent, and any shift in the white point or green magenta value is imperceivable. Now let's take a look at the average CCT accuracies. From 2000 Kelvin to 3000 Kelvin, the light is off the target value by an average of -12 Kelvin. From 3050 Kelvin to 4000 Kelvin, the light is off the target value by an average of 56 Kelvin. From 4050 Kelvin to 5000 Kelvin, the light is typically off the target value by +164 Kelvin. And from 5050 Kelvin to 6000 Kelvin, the light is off the target value by an average of 141 Kelvin. Now let's take a look at our colour render or colour accuracy measured in TM30 RF. At 2000 Kelvin, the light has its lowest score of 86, but by the time it gets to 2200 Kelvin, that's up at 91. From 2250 Kelvin to 2450, it scores a 92. From 2500 to 2650 Kelvin, it scores a 93. And from 2700 Kelvin to 6000 Kelvin, where I stopped taking individual readings, it scores a 94. Now let's take a look at white point accuracy measured in delta UV. From 2000 Kelvin to 3000 Kelvin, it is tracking very close to the Planckian curve with an average delta UV of minus 0.0006. From 3050 Kelvin to 4000 Kelvin, it is still tracking extremely accurate to the Planckian curve with an average delta UV of plus or minus 0.0004. Between 4050 Kelvin to 5000 Kelvin, it starts to move away from the Planckian curve to somewhere between the Planckian and daylight curve, but because this move isn't dramatic, I'm happy to give it an average of plus 0.0009. And from 5050 Kelvin to 6000 Kelvin, it is tracking above the Planckian curve with a delta UV of plus 0.0010. Let's take a closer look at some of the kelvins now, starting off with the lowest kelvin that we can dial in, and these readings are taken with no diffuser on the front. When I dialed in 2000 Kelvin, I got 1999. The TN30 colour render results were 88% average colour accuracy with an average 108% colour saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and half of them are under 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point came in with a delta UV of minus 0.0013, which will give the light at this point, without any green magenta correction, a magenta colour hue to roughly half of a 1/8 gel equivalent. Now, I've also decided to share the data at 2500 Kelvin because from 2500 Kelvin onwards, these lights have really good colour render scores. When I dialed in 2500 Kelvin, I got 2480. The TN30 colour testing results were 93% average colour accuracy with a 105% average colour saturation. With the CRI scores, R11 is below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point came in very accurate with a delta UV of minus 0.0005. When I dialed in 3200 Kelvin, I got 3213 with an SSI score of 82. The TN30 colour testing results were 94% average colour accuracy with an average 104% colour saturation. With the CRI scores, only R12 is below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point is very close to perfect with a delta UV of minus 0.0004. When I dialed in 4400 Kelvin, I got 4558. The TN30 colour testing results were 93% average colour accuracy with an average 102% colour saturation. With the CRI scores, R9 and R12 were below 90. This is a spectrum distribution, and has a very accurate white point with a delta UV of plus 0.0006. When I dialed in 5600 Kelvin, I got 5714 with an SSI score of 73. The TN30 colour testing results were 94% average colour accuracy with an average 102% colour saturation. With the CRI scores, only R12 is below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point came in with a delta UV of plus 0.0016, which splits it absolutely in the middle between the Planckian curve and the daylight curve. Let's take a quick look at some of the higher kelvins. I've taken readings here at 7000, 8000 and 9000 Kelvin. When I dialed in 10,000 Kelvin, I got 10,279. The TN30 colour testing results were 91% average colour accuracy with an average 98% colour saturation. But take a close look at the graphics because this is where averages can be misleading. With the CRI scores, only R12 is below 90. Here is the spectrum distribution, and the light is still tracking beautifully between the daylight and Planckian curve with a delta UV of plus 0.0011. Now let's see how accurately these lights can dial in a colour vector. When I dialed in 0 degrees or red, I got 1 degree. When I dialed in 120 degrees or green, I got 117. Blue was smack on its colour vector at 240. When I dialed in 60 degrees or yellow, I got 62. But if you want a decent looking yellow, I'd suggest dialing in 45 degrees. When I dialed in 180 degrees or cyan, I got 168 degrees. And when I dialed in 300 degrees or magenta, it was very close at 307 degrees. Right, that's another gear review done. Thank you very much for watching. Just my closing thoughts on these. In this situation here, I've got two kits. Now, usually in this sort of situation, I would sell one of the kits and pocket the money because how often am I going to need 16 Aputure MCs? Not often enough that it justifies keeping the two kits, but the simple fact that I can use these as CRMX receivers as well is why I'm keeping both of the kits. So quite often I find I'm on jobs where I might need 4 of these or 5 of them on rotation, and I also need some additional CRMX receivers. And that for me justifies having the 2 kits here. Now also, you don't need to buy the 8 kits. You might figure that 8's not enough, you need 10. Well, you could buy an 8 kit and buy 2 singles as well. I'm Andrew Locke, see you on the next episode of Gaffer and Gear. Take care.